ABC analyst Casey Briggs joins us now to take a look at the figures both here in Australia and overseas. Casey, g'day. Yeah, so just take us through those Australian figures this morning. Keen to hear what you've got to say firstly about, 17 new cases in Victoria, which is concerning, but also that case in WA. First time I've actually heard that happening.
There's a lot to unpack in lots of the numbers today, Joe, but just first on that WA case, obviously the point of putting people that come into Australia into this mandatory hotel quarantine is to cordon them off so that they are quarantined from the rest of the community. It does, we've seen quite clearly that it does cut the transmission rate from those people almost down to zero, but obviously not quite. There's always, they always have to come into contact with a few people. And in this case, this is the first person I've heard of working in one of these hotels. Not saying it's the first one, but certainly the first one I'm aware of that has become infected with the virus. So, that's one person out of and thousands of people that have gone into these quarantines. So a very, very low transmission rate. So nothing too alarming there, but interesting nonetheless. As you say, zero in New South Wales for the first time. Queensland also has zero. Now, the government has added 6 new cases to its total count today, but we're counting it as zero because they're all cases of Queensland residents being treated or have been treated in other states. Those cases had already been counted in those states, so they're not new in Australia's total, which is why we've moved them in our database, but we are not counting them as new cases. That's why that's a zero. And 17 in Victoria. So Victoria's numbers are interesting as well. 8 of them linked to the Cedar Meats abattoir cluster. 6 workers, 2 close contacts of those workers. All of those workers are obviously now in quarantine. So again, hopefully there's not too much more onward transmission. The rest of the 17, so about 9 or so of those are cases still under investigation. We don't know whether they'll eventually be traced back to a cluster, whether they'll be eventually determined to be of completely unknown cause. But I should say, just because Victoria has the biggest number at the moment isn't necessarily a bad thing. It does mean they're mopping up the lingering infection in the community, which means, there are 9 less people out of those under investigation cases, 9 less people that could be unknowingly transmitting this, that could create clusters down the track. So, if there are cases there, you want to catch them and you want to catch them early. So, not necessarily the worst sign in the world.
Yeah, and Victoria's had a big boost in testing, I think, over the last week or so, and New South Wales didn't have comparatively that many tests yesterday. Okay, so let's now turn to an international country. It's always good to look at kind of one international country to see how it's faring. Now, Russia is lifting some restrictions, but what's happening with the number of cases in Russia at the moment?
Yeah, it's an interesting decision of Russia to lift restrictions given the position that they're in at the moment. Russia has, I'm going to talk about the cases first and then we'll come to the deaths because there's a bit to say on both. Russia has just leapfrogged over Italy to now have the 4th most cases in the world on official numbers. And with Russia, I think there's a very good question over whether how reliable these numbers necessarily are, and I'll take you through that in a second. But let's look at Russia's curve, and you can see most of the, these developed countries, the countries that have been most hardly hit, were getting their sort of first outbreaks really early on, February, January, early March. Russia hasn't had this curve start on the official numbers until later in March, and they've now just recorded a record 11,700 cases in a single day. And this curve is very steep. Let's compare it to a couple of other countries in the sort of top rates. So we've got Spain here, which is levelling off in its cumulative number of cases. We've got Italy also seeing some levelling off. The United Kingdom still growing, but Russia, you see, they're all almost at the same point. Russia with a far steeper trajectory. And so one of the problems that Russia's got at the moment is if we sort of see the same sorts of numbers out of these 3 countries in the next day, Russia will actually move up to 2nd place tomorrow. So yet to be seen if that will happen, but Russia is growing much faster than the United Kingdom and Spain. They will probably be in 2nd place tomorrow unless we see a dramatic change in the sorts of numbers these countries are reporting. Now, while Russia is 4th in terms of cases, it's actually all the way down here in terms of deaths. It's below Belgium, below Iran, below Canada, below Mexico, Ecuador. 2,000 deaths in Russia, which is significantly fewer than you might expect given that number of cases is so high. We know there's a lag in the death rate. Cases take a while to become so severe that people then sadly pass away. So that might explain part of that. but there is also evidence that this is a dramatic underestimate. The Financial Times in the UK has done an analysis of just a couple of cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg, and they reckon, from what they've looked at, that could be an underestimate of at least 70%. So real questions about the accuracy of these numbers. We should expect that to grow up given how steeply the case curve is going up as well.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Casey Briggs.